Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Bold Faith Bible, our continued study of the book of Revelation. Once again, the revelation of Jesus Christ. Not the revelation of future events, but the revelation of Jesus Christ. Let's keep that in mind as we study through this book. We're in chapter 18, and we are seeing the fall of the political Babylon. Last week on the Revelation 17 episode, we were looking at the fall of the religious Babylon, but here we're seeing this second Babylon. So you have the religious Babylon, which the Antichrist and all the forces of evil tolerate because it undermines the church and good teaching, but they secretly hate it. And eventually they're going to overthrow the religious Babylon and replace it with this political Babylon that is going to be... The previous one was hated by the kings, and this Babylon is going to be loved by the kings. When it falls, the kings of the earth are going to mourn. We're going to see this in here. Remember, chapter 17 and chapter 18 are kind of these asides. They're not moving the story forward. We've already been told that Babylon will be destroyed in chapter 16, but we need a little more detail here, so chapter 17 and 18 are telling us more about the fall of Babylon before the return of Jesus Christ in chapter 19. So if you're hanging on and expecting Jesus to come back in this chapter, hang on just a little longer. We'll get to him coming back. I know it's like that always, isn't it? We're longing for the return of Jesus Christ, but it's just a little bit longer. In this study, one more week. In life, who knows? It could be next week, it could be next year, it could be 10 decades from now, I don't know. Chapter 18. Let's read it. After this, I saw another angel with great authority coming down from heaven, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. He called out with a mighty voice, "It is fallen. Babylon the Great has fallen. She has become a home for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, and a haunt for every unclean and despicable beast. For all the nations have drunk the wine of her sexual immorality, which brings wrath. The kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown wealthy from her sensuality and excess." Then I heard another voice from heaven. "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, or receive of her plagues. For her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. Pay her back the way she also paid, and double it, according to her works. In the cup which she has mixed, mix a double portion for her. As much as she glorified herself and indulged her sensual and excessive ways, give her that much torment and grief. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen. I am not a widow, and I will never see grief. For this reason, her plagues will come in just one day, death and grief and famine. She will be burned up with fire because the Lord God who judges her is mighty." So we see here the fall of the political Babylon. We will see, this is the section of the fall of Babylon, and then this next section that we'll go into in just a moment, we will see how the world reacts to the fall of Babylon. We will see those who mourn over her. And the people that are going to mourn over her the most are going to be the people who benefited so much from her. The political Babylon is rich and wealthy, and we see this merchandising. We see the sexual immorality, we see the merchandising of everything, and this great wealth is what people will mourn. They will mourn the loss of it because they lose money at this. If you want to get people to mourn, make them lose money. Right? If you want people to be very happy that you're gone, leave them a very large inheritance, right? Leave them nothing but bills and they will mourn your passing. I think we have that backwards sometimes, don't we? So it is fallen. It has fallen. So this is the news that this great angel says. And this is possibly one of the angels with the bowls in his hands. Or perhaps a different one. But whoever it is, it's a mighty angel. And we see this declaration that Babylon is fallen. And we see that Babylon will fall very, very quickly. And verse 8 will come in just one day. Death and grief and famine, she will be burned up with fire, because the Lord God who judges her is mighty. So this won't take a long time. Babylon will fall like that and be wiped off the face of the earth. It's an interesting story. If you've ever seen like Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that, one of the ports that they're always in is called Port Royal. And that's not a fictitious place. In fact, it is a very real place. It was the second largest port in the Western Hemisphere after New York, I believe. It was down the Caribbean on present-day Jamaica. But it was a city that was known for piracy and wickedness and slavery and all sorts of evil. It was an evil, evil place. And it was a place that was consumed in one day. A massive earthquake struck, and it devastated much of the city, and a tidal wave followed in after it and wiped the beach clean. Very few people survived, and they took it as God's judgment on the place, a modern-day Babylon. So Port Royal was never rebuilt. Just wiped off the face of the map. All the buildings were buried or wiped away by the tidal wave. The forts that were there, buried, and you can go there now to Jamaica and you will see the flat sand where the city once stood. And that's kind of almost like what we're going to see here. The judgment of God is going to just come down upon the city of Babylon. Is it going to be Jerusalem? Is it going to be a city that's going to be built for this express purpose? Is it going to be a city built on the ruins of literal Babylon? It could be any of those. I lean a little more towards it being Jerusalem itself. We saw that Jerusalem will be destroyed. It will be broken up in a single day, and I believe that might be what this is referring to. It could be something else, though. But whatever we see is we see that this political Babylon the Antichrist will have will be destroyed very rapidly, and it will be seen by everyone as judgment. And why is it destroyed? We see the sexual immorality. And the merchants of the earth have grown wealthy, verse 3, towards the end, have grown wealthy, and her sensuality and excess. So, whenever you have people who are profiting from other people's labor, when you have this like merchant class, this banking class where people are just harvesting all this money from other people's hard work, that is, it's kind of evil. All right? It's not just kind of evil, it just is evil. Other people's hard work that other people are kind of leeching off of, the more you have this imbalance where people who are working hard to produce products are getting paid practically nothing, and yet the people who are pushing buttons on computers and moving money around and buying in and selling and commodities and stuff like that are reaping in millions and millions and millions of dollars. I think that speaks very much to what this passage is talking about. The United States, I talk about this over on my preparedness channel, the United States is printing dollars and basically just taxing the whole world and living off of the hard work of most countries out there by printing this paper and basically stealing the value from these other countries. They're giving them paper and getting actual work and hard work and services and goods in exchange for that paper that's just being printed. But it says here in verse 4, this admonition, you may have heard this before, come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins or receive any of her plagues. Now, if you're in the preparedness community, you may have heard this from one particular preparedness person, or several that are a part of that clan, and they take this passage to mean that you should physically remove yourself from the world system as far as you can, not do business, not make money, but move out to the country and get as far away from the cities as you can and isolate yourself from the evil that is taking place in the United States. And I don't think that's exactly what it means, but I could see that as an application here. When you see your society as being tremendously wicked and evil just penetrating everything that society touches, I can see that. I could see that. Now, you should still be reaching out. You should still be trying to reach people with the gospel. You should still be serving people. But there is definitely an admonition here. Now, this is particularly to people, in Babylon, the political Babylon in the tribulation period. But there's this application that, don't be there. Don't be in the relationships. Don't be in the companies that are doing the evil and wickedness. Try to be in good companies. Try to be in places where you are not being pressured intensely to compromise your morals. And because what happens is you tend to drift. When you're around people that are into evil, you tend to drift. Take Lot, for example, in Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot was a righteous man, but then you see what he did right after that, and you can see that his morality has definitely drifted during his time in Sodom and Gomorrah. He would have been better to be like Abraham and stay far, far away. So don't share in her sins or receive any of her plagues. If you participate in the sins, you will participate in the plagues. That's just how it works. You reap what you sow. Be around righteous people. Be around people that are going to push you in the right direction, but make sure you're close enough to the lost that you can still reach out to them. Verse 5, for her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. You will pay for what you have done. And people who think that they can do evil and not pay for it. And it says here, a double portion. For all of the excessive evil that she has done, she'll be receiving back double portion. And this it will never happen to me attitude is especially pointed out by God as worthy of judgment. Let's see how the world responds. Verse 9. The kings of the earth who have committed sexual immorality and shared her sensual and excessive ways will weep and mourn over her when they see the smoke from her burning. They will stand off in fear of her torment, saying, woe, woe, the great city, Babylon, the mighty city, for in a single hour your judgment has come. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargo any longer. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet, all kinds of fragrant wood products, objects of ivory, objects of expensive wood, brass, iron, and marble, and cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, and frankincense, wine, olive oil, fine flour, and grain, cattle and sheep, horses and carriages, and slaves, human lives. You see, they're trading in everything. And all these people who are bringing these goods to Babylon will suddenly have no buyer. And so they're going to mourn over this. Verse 14, the fruit you craved has left you. All your splendor and glamorous things are gone. They will never find them again. The merchants of these things who became rich from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning, saying, woe, woe, the great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, jewels, and pearls, for in a single hour such fabulous wealth was destroyed. So they're going to mourn all this money that was lost and how they're not going to make any money, and that's why they're upset. And every shipmaster, seafarer, and sailors, and all who do business by sea stood far off as they watched the smoke from her burning, and kept crying out, "Who was like the great city?" They threw dust on their heads and kept crying out, weeping and mourning, "Woe, woe, the great city, where all those who have ships on the sea became rich from her wealth. For in a single hour she was destroyed. Rejoice over her, heaven, and you saints." So that now this is the saints responding, this commandment to rejoice over the destruction of Babylon. "Rejoice over her, heaven, and you saints, apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced on her the judgment she passed on you." Remember, they persecute and kill Christians and Jews and everyone. Then a mighty angel picked up a stone like a large millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, "In this way Babylon the great city will be thrown down violently and never be found again." So suddenly and totally and completely, right? And never be found again. "The sound of harpists and musicians, flutists and trumpets will never be heard in you again. No craftsman of any trade will ever be found in you again. The sound of a mill will never be heard in you again. The light of a lamp will never shine in you again. The voice of a groom and bride will never be heard in you again. All this will happen because your merchants were merchants were the nobility of the earth, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery," or pharmaceuticals. Yeah, same Greek word. "In her was found the blood of prophets and saints and all those slaughtered on the earth." So the destruction of Babylon happens suddenly, and the merchants will mourn. The saints will rejoice because the blood of the saints has run in her streets. It is not a good place, and partially because of trading in, pharmacy stuff, as well as the merchants being nobility. Once again, not the hard workers, not the factory workers, but the merchants, the traders, the stock market people. They have taken and stolen so much from the hard work of everyone on the earth, and that is part of the judgment that will reside on her. All right, folks, next week we will see the return of Jesus, so come back next week once again, but hopefully this has been helpful to you, and God bless you all. If you have time to check out some other Bible studies, here's some right here, some playlists. Otherwise, I will see you later. God bless you all.